When the chips were down in a big game, Connor McDavid cemented himself in Canadian hockey lore on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday, Victory Friday, if you were rooting for Canada, edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, jam-packed. So much to get to, so little time. We're going to have a whole 9 minutes to talk about how great Connor McDavid is. I know everybody here at Locked On Oilers loves when I do that. It's important. Tonight is the kind of night where we're going to celebrate what the best player in the world is capable of, what he means to the sport, and why it's so important he got to have this signature moment. We'll talk about the game at large in our second segment, hit on the key points, what worked for Canada this time around that didn't the first time, and then we'll tie a bow on the Four Nations face-off, kind of what worked out well for the NHL, why this was a successful event, what kind of tenor and momentum this can build going forward for both this season and then going into next year for the Olympics international play. So this is the type of game you dream about. Every single person who's picked up a hockey stick and shot a ball or a puck in their driveway into a net, they've imagined it's overtime of a do or die game. Some people, it's game 7 of a Stanley Cup final. Some people, it's a gold medal game of the Olympics. And this was not the Olympics. This isn't a World Cup of hockey. This isn't a Stanley Cup. This is an entirely arbitrarily made up NHL sanctioned event. But this was best on best hockey. And there was star power galore all over the ice, both teams. And in that moment where you saw Connor McDavid find the puck on his stick with 5 to 10 feet of room in every single direction around him, it was simply a matter of if he was going to hit the net or not. It really came down to the most straightforward of problems if you're a goal scorer. Can I hit the net trying to pick a corner because Connor Hellebuyck is as good as he is? And McDavid, in scoring that goal, has himself a signature moment the first time he's representing Canada in a true best-on-best tournament. He's representing Canada at World Cup, at World Championships, which typically start right after the NHL regular season ends. And if the Oilers miss the playoffs, this was several years ago now, or of course, in the World Cup of Hockey back in 2016, he was on Team North America. So this mattered a lot for him. I think you saw the way he and Nathan MacKinnon, he and Sidney Crosby, he and Mitch Marner, a lot of these guys have grown up together, or in the case of Crosby and the young guys, and I know I'm using young guys very loosely when I talk about Connor McDavid, they've spent their entire lives looking up at Sid. That's how it's done. That is the great Canadian hockey player that we all aspire to be. And taking up that torch is not something that everyone's capable of. And I think these types of signature moments, and look, nothing is ever, I shouldn't say ever, but I feel very confident in saying there's a 99.9999999 repeating indefinitely percent chance. The biggest goal in the history of Canadian hockey will always be Sid's golden goal in the 2010 Olympics, because it was on home soil, because it was in overtime, because it was against the United States. You add all that up, I don't think you're going to be able to find environmental factors to create a bigger goal. But for Connor, for his contemporaries like Nathan MacKinnon, some of the younger guys on this team, this is really a salvo. This is, America's coming. They're getting better at hockey. This is still our game. You know, you saw Prime Minister Trudeau tweet that after the game, that very proud of the guys being able to win that game. And hockey is still Canada's game. And look, There's nothing wrong with friendly rivalry. A little banter is good. That's not unhealthy. It's a rivalry. Sports are supposed to be competitive. You're allowed to be competitive. You're allowed to be spicy. But over the last few days, few weeks, it lost the playful tenor that rivalries are built on respect. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the second segment. But for Connor, for this team, it hasn't been easy. In a short format, you don't get a lot of time to gel. You got a handful of practices together as a group, even less time as far as your special teams work. And then, as the game goes along, the benches start to get shorter. Who's playing with who? How are we going to find a way to score? And I was thoroughly impressed with the way Canada met the moment. And I told you on yesterday's edition of Locked On Oilers, I said it on yesterday's Locked On NHL with Hunter Hodes, Canada has significantly more big game experience throughout their lineup. Throughout that forward group, you talk McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, Marchand, Point, Sorelli, all of those guys, ubiquitous playoff experience. Jordan Binnington, for all his faults, for all his inconsistencies, both with the Blues and in this short format. I know there's still conjecture going on about the first goal he gave up last Saturday on the first Jake Gensel goal. Jordan Binnington was great tonight. Jordan Binnington was one of the differences between winning and losing this game, in overtime in particular. He stonewalled Austin Matthews, who had a couple really good looks. Brady Tkachuk had a really good look as well. I am very, very impressed with the quality of hockey that was able to be sustained tonight. And look, it was not a perfectly executed game. There were a lot of breakdowns. The longer overtime went along, the more structure started to break down. Guys weren't passing. Defensive players were not passing their assignments off to the next guy properly. That's why McDavid gets as open as he does, because there's a miscommunication, because those guys are worn out. That breakneck pace in overtime is really hard to sustain. You're running a short bench. You're trying to get your best players out there as often as you can to mitigate what the other guys are doing. And for the game to come down to that, and look, I jokingly said Gary's scriptwriters went crazy. If you're the NHL, this couldn't possibly have gone any better for you. You got the two teams you wanted in the final. They played a great game. It went to overtime. Your best player scored the game-winning goal in overtime in the midst of geopolitical turmoil that has riled up people who don't particularly care about hockey. It's put hockey in the mainstream lexicon. It's forced the talking head sports shows that spend endless hours talking about the NBA and the NFL, no matter what time of year it is, to talk about hockey, to talk about the social impact of hockey. And this game is not more than a game. And I talked about this for a bit on yesterday's show, and we'll talk more about it in the next segment, but I do want to say this. Not everything is inherently political. Two teams playing a hockey game representing countries is not inherently political. But the stakeholders, the powerful, the rich people of the world, they live their lives like everything is potentially political. And we live in that world, stakeholders who invest in political campaigns, who control powerful companies that invent things. Those are the people who dictate the terms the rest of us live on. They're able to manufacture the world we live in, whether we're talking literally in terms of the goods and services we can buy, the candidates we can vote for. So it is important that you keep in mind, even as a sports fan, where you tell yourself, I don't want to get involved. I really am not a political person. It's unfortunate that it really can't work like that, because the people out there in the world have decided, the people who make the world the way it is have decided that if there's an opportunity to advance your agenda, they're going to use it. So we're going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, We're going to get into the details of the game itself, what worked for Canada this game that didn't the first time around, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whenever I'm watching a game with my friends and a team goes on a little run, we're always going to check what the odds are just in case we want to get in on the fun. Never feels like you miss a chance with live betting. Plus, the FanDuel app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are recapping Canada's big win over the States in the Four Nations Face-Off final. And this was a very compelling hockey game from the perspective of when you think about the goals, you go back and you watch the goal scorers. You're talking about a really clunky scoring chance from Nathan MacKinnon, where there is significant traffic in front of the net for the United States, and Connor Hellebuyck does not see the puck. I very vividly remember as MacKinnon was cutting across the center lane of the ice, that there were 2 or 3 layers of traffic in front of Hellebuyck. So not only could Hellebuyck not really square himself to the shooter, he didn't see the puck at all. You know, Hellebuyck was looking the wrong way when the puck had gone past him for the goal. And I think that's a testament to doing a good job of just creating traffic, creating mayhem, forcing American defenders to kind of overlap with each other, using the defenders as screens as well. And then you look at the 2 U.S. goals, the Brady Tkachuk goal, the Jake Sanderson goal. Those are ugly. Those are net front. Those are sustained pressures where forechecking plays a difference. Austin Matthews wraps it around, sets up Tkachuk in front, and that's a case where off of a face-off, you have a set play. And I know I wouldn't really consider that a rush opportunity because the puck goes below the goal line and it's a dump in to a pass to a shot. So I wouldn't really qualify that as a rush opportunity, even though it effectively has that same effect where the defense is in conflict because the puck goes below the goal line and forces Canadian defenders to pick who to cover. And that goal gets the U.S. in the game. And I do want to talk about the U.S. angle of this game just a little bit here in this segment as well, because I do think it's worth talking about. I think the external stuff, I don't want to play too much into the narrative game that the U.S. was distracted, the political angle of this, making this game more than it was, if it hurt the U.S., if it fired Canada up more. I don't know. I can't authoritatively tell you, well, Canada was pissed off. The U.S. was joking about making it the 51st state. And look, do I think that might have come up at some point as far as motivation? Yeah, athletes are insane. You think about some of the stories you hear about guys like Michael Jordan, like Tom Brady, who they got to find any little slight, any little thing that someone might have said to them or even didn't say to them. They made it up entirely just to get themselves extra psyched up. So the 51st state jokes that I know a lot of my Canadian friends were upset by and found offensive, I very easily could see a world where the players on that team might have said it as far as hey, we're not the 51st state. We're going to go out there and beat them. They're going to be the 11th, 12th province if we have our way, you know? And look, that outside noise, the culture war stuff that really permeates all walks of life. I don't think that's particularly unique to hockey. I just think hockey happened to be the conduit for the conversation. So we'll see if that dies down after this tournament dissipates and we go back to regular season hockey. But I think the U.S. played about as good a game as they could. And look, I know a lot of my friends are very disappointed in Jack Eichel and Austin Matthews. Excuse me, not Jack Eichel, Jack Hughes and Austin Matthews. And some of the depth guys, some of the lineup decisions as far as playing Chris Kreider over Kyle Connor, a lot of Brock Nelson, a lot of JT Miller. And look, I know no Matthew Tkachuk is a massive loss. You could make an argument Matthew Tkachuk is the United States' best winger, a left or right, and not having him really put their lineup in a blender, especially as the game went along, not running even line distribution, so there's less work to really have. And look, it's a coin flip game. The first time they played last Saturday, I know the final score was 3-1. That was a coin flip game until the Jake Gensel empty net goal. Tonight, this game was a coin flip game. It was a 1-goal game. Both goalies made really good saves. Both teams had shooters in grade A scoring chance locations, and they missed. I wouldn't read too much into this loss. If I were the United States, did I learn something? Yeah. I think ultimately the most important thing, if you're the United States or you're an American hockey fan watching this and you want what's the takeaway, I think you need to fine tune your roster a little bit more. No Quinn Hughes, no Charlie McAvoy, massive losses. You can make an argument those guys might play together and that would be the first pair. I think Brock Faber looked reasonably comfortable in this environment, his first real taste of international best on best. I think Adam Fox probably looked the worst of the American defensemen. I did not like his game. I am an ardent Adam Fox guy. I've been defending the Adam Fox mantle since like the fall of 2019 when he was a rookie. I think his game is in a weird place where his reads aren't crisp. He's not moving the puck efficiently or as quickly as he needs to. And because he's not the most physically gifted player in terms of size or speed, he looks a little bit slow. I think that was a cause for concern. I think Zach Werenski was okay. I think Jacob Slavin was their best defenseman. I think Jack Eichel was their best forward. But the Canadian perspective in this game, I really think there's a conversation to be had about if Drew Doughty and Brad Marchand should be on the Olympic team next year. I think in an ideal world, you probably want to go with one of Mackenzie Weegar or Evan Bouchard or Thomas Harley in that Drew Doughty spot. I think you arguably want to go with someone else in that Marchand spot, even if it's Mark Scheifele. I know you want to get guys like Doughty, like Marchand on the team because their long service, their previous time with Canada, the loyalty you have as a federation to guys you've had since they played for you in in the World Juniors. You want to put them, feature them, pass on that championship winning DNA from those groups to the next wave. But I think that's a conversation. But this was a great hockey game, man. Anybody who's getting particularly up in arms about the outcome one way or another, this was a coin flip game that went to overtime with the best players in the world on the ice. Are there players who weren't in this tournament who have a conversation to be best player in the world? Yeah, sure. Roman Josi was sitting at home. Leon Draisaitl was sitting at home. There are plenty of gifted players who weren't playing, or guys on Sweden and Finland who didn't make the final. So this is as high stakes, as high pressure an environment as you're going to get, and lived up to the hype. That was an incredible hockey game. Even though I was rooting for the States, I picked Canada for a reason. We're going to talk a little bit about that coming up next in our final segment of today's show. We'll tie a bow on the Four Nations face-off, some ideas as far as going forward, when we might see this event again, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. It's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage in as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on today's Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. And if you're Gary Bettman, you're Bill Daly, you're probably doing Donald Duck dives through piles of money right now because you realize you found a solution to some of your problems. I don't think you can run this event every year. I don't even know if you can run this event every other year. I do think 2-year blocks, opposite Olympic years, even years. So let's say the Olympics are in 2026. I think we revisit this concept either as an X number of nations or a World Cup of hockey. I think we want to try and find a way to incorporate more federations to highlight different players. We want to get the Czech Republic here. We would like to get Slovakia here, Switzerland, Germany. There are hockey playing nations over there that have great players that we want to feature. We want to highlight. We want to get guys out there in the lexicon. You know, the Tkachuk brothers, as annoying as they were, they went mainstream over the weekend for the 2 fights in the first game. They went mainstream. They got casual news and casual sports fan attention. You add that to the unreal play in this tournament, and you've got a very easy solution to your all-star game problem every couple years. And look, the owners will tinker. They will be annoying. The players care about this. That's the most important thing. And the reason why I believe we're going to see this kind of stick around, I think the fact that the guys embraced it and took it seriously. Guys were playing through injuries like the Tkachuks, Austin Matthews playing through what was reportedly the flu, Canadians dealing with the flu as well that was going around. Once the tournament relocated to Boston, that knocked quite a few people out. But the players cared. You saw the reactions, you saw the celebration, you saw the hugs, you saw the emotions. This matters. Anytime you are representing Canada or the United States or Sweden or Finland or Russia or the Czech Republic or Switzerland or Denmark or whatever country you want to highlight, that matters. Guys are not going to phone it in. Guys are not going to play at half speed. Now, you can't milk this like you have the Winter Classic, the Stadium Series, because then it loses its luster. But as a showcase, opposite Olympic years, to kind of be a ramp-up audition process, it makes perfect sense. And I am happy for Connor McDavid that he got to have this moment. You think about how that Stanley Cup final ended, and I'm sorry I have to bring this up, but you think about Sergei Bobrovsky being out of the net. You think about Connor McDavid finding the puck on his stick with an open net in front of him, 5 feet from the net mouth. You think about Brandon Montour getting his stick in that lane and stopping Connor from scoring that goal to tie Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final after being down 3-0. This does not replace that. This is not an Olympic gold medal. This is not a World Cup of Hockey gold medal. But you saw just how much this mattered to the guys on this team. I think more than anything, you saw the faces of the players on the United States standing at the opposite end of the ice with pure dejection, watching the Canadians celebrate. And This is a case where iron does sharpen iron. You are going to learn something from this if you're the US, as far as the players you bring, maybe the coaches you want to employ, what type of tactics you want to use, because this was a coin flip game. And you can make an argument the United States brought a more talented roster. And if you have a coin flip game and you have the more talented roster, that means you're leaving meat on the bone. That there's something there that you didn't capitalize on. And I, just as an observer, just as someone who genuinely loves hockey and considers hockey part of my identity, it's part of who I am as a person. That was a great celebration of our game. That is what our game can be at the highest level when we are highlighting what's great about it, the passion, the energy, the guys going out there less than 100% and willing to lay it all out there, and what that means to your teammates, what that means to your coaching staff, and capitalizing on the moment. Rick Nash said it after a goal in a Rangers-Canadiens playoff series. I believe it was the first round in 2017. Mika Zibanejad scored an overtime game-winning goal, and in the locker room after the game, when they were doing the players' player of the game, where they give out a little trinket, Rick Nash said, in overtime, the good players find the puck, and the puck finds good players. And Connor McDavid is the best player in the world. The puck ended up on his stick, and Connor McDavid called game. You cannot get a more fitting end to a showcase of what the best hockey in the world looks like than the best player in the world leading a slight upset of a team that had spent the previous week and a half running its mouth and trying to embrace its newfound stardom. And I can say it as someone who finds some of that a little bit condescending and a little bit rude. The United States got what it deserved tonight, trying to act like they're going to annex Canada. This is a hockey game. Trying to make it into something it's not, to be part of an agenda, is foolhardy. The States got what they deserved tonight. Canada was the better team when the chips were down. It's why I picked them to win. It's why I felt they were going to win the rematch. It's really hard to beat a team twice in the span of a week. I think it's really hard to beat a team when you have as much experience in these types of big game environments as Canada does, especially you compare that to United States. If I remember correctly from the preview episode, 500 something more playoff games on Team Canada than the US. Not a lot of Stanley Cup final experience on the US team. And the only guy on Team USA who I felt like really elevated their game to this environment was Jack Eichel. I think Jack Eichel really cemented himself as the best two-way American forward, especially in this tournament. I think he did a great job on the one penalty kill in the third period, the one penalty that was in this game. Second penalty that was in this game, excuse me. I want to see this tournament continue to mean something. I just don't want it to become a lightning rod for the culture war. This is supposed to be fun. And unfortunately, you can't sit out. Everything has an undertone of, well, if this happens, this happens. So try and celebrate this, savor this. You earn this, Oiler fans. Your best player, the best player in the world, made the biggest play in the tournament. He scored the goal that won the whole thing. It's not quite Sid in Vancouver in 2010, but it's a pretty good feeling. I'm happy for you. You guys deserve this. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. So if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. We'll get a notification whenever new content goes live. I will talk to you guys on Monday when the Oilers will have played some games over the weekend. Stretch run, folks. Buckle up.